methods to estimate numbers of manatee. Very important topic. How many manatees do we have? With particular reference to some survey methods, to introduce you to some of the methods available. This is mortality. That shows that manatees will die. When they die in the water, after some time they will float. They will float. So you have no problem if manatee has died. They will float. Floated, as you see here. And that's the situation. That's me here. Okay, on the floated manatee. So we send this to the bank and we do what we call necropsy, the cause of the death of the animal. That is another topic. But this section is more on estimating the numbers. In spite of the importance of estimating number of manatees, it has become clear that we need to know, if you want to know, you must know the age structure of the population. Because the population is made up of cows, it's made up of juveniles, it's made up of adults. So it's like doing population of Senegal. You cannot just measure the children and say that is the population of Senegal. You have to know the population structure. How many cows, how many children, how many women, how many old men. That's exactly what we are talking about. If you want to measure the population of manatees, which clearly means that it's a difficult task. We also have to find population parameters like the calving interval, how many children are added per year, or the birth rate, the death rate. So many parameters have to be found before we can tell you exactly the population at any given time. Scientifically, we can do this work by what we call population modeling. And population modeling is a science of using information about individuals of a given species in a given region to determine present trends and status of that population. Now, population modeling in our environment clearly will be difficult because the material, the data needed, even now we don't know the standard length of the mean standard length of manatee. So you need some information such as the number of individuals of breeding age. You need to know the birth rate, the death rate. Obviously, these data are not currently easily available for the West African manatee. And therefore, it is difficult for us to tell you the actual population of the manatee. In fact, even in the advanced countries like Florida, they cannot tell you the total number of manatees in their waters. So, but we can find the relative abundance. Other factors that may influence the population include food sources, disease outbreak, rate of predation. All this information, weather conditions, are not easily available, making it difficult for us to estimate. So do not ask us, we will not attempt to try to estimate the total number of manatees in the West African region. It's almost perhaps impossible because of the data needed, even if you want to do population modeling. However, it does not mean that we can sit down and not do anything. We can do some surveys to give us idea about presence, absence of the animal. Some of the surveys that can be employed, the first one is expensive area surveys have been suggested. Now we can do area surveys. The best way is one of the best ways to find the population of manatees. But you can only do that if the water is clear. And apparently in West Africa, almost in their range everywhere, the water is murky and turbid. So it's difficult to say you want to use this method. But we need to show you how it's done briefly. During this survey, you get an airplane or helicopter. I don't know whether Wetland International want to consider this option. And then we fly over the habitat. This will be done, this would like to cover a wider area. Maybe flying from Nigeria, Angola, all the way to Mauritania. So you can cover within a short time a wider area. If the water were clear, but the water is not clear. And also if we have the means, it's expensive. So in this method, you just count any manatees you see. You record the locations on map, GPS positions, and on data sheets. And if this is done along consistent paths, the element, the plane follows a consistent transit or path. We are able to make a map of the distribution of the animal, following strict transit surveys, using systematic flight paths. And then we can find distribution of the animal. But it is very costly. Very, very costly. But can be done if we have the means. And but unfortunately the water is unclear. So this option, perhaps, I don't know whether we will want to consider this option. The next option is tracking. Now, our ability to move around our environment is second nature to us. So much so that when the ability is restricted by mishap or injury, then you know that movement is very important. The moment you have accident and you cannot move, then you see that movement is very, very important. Most wild animals depend on their movement for their survival, because that is the way they get food and shelter. Manatee moves. And so by tracking the movements of individual manatees, we track it, we follow it. We are able to learn so many things about the animal. One, the location of critical habitats. If we track it. The critical habitat, those sizes where the large numbers spend lots of time feeding sites. By following tracking, we can know the feeding sites. We can obtain information on where they go for drinking water, mating, calving, and where they even keep warm or rest. So tracking is another useful method which will give us much information on their presence and importance. We also gain information on the seasonal migration patterns from tracking. We also gain knowledge on the foraging habitats. So tracking is also a very important way of learning about the relative abundance of the manatee. Apparently, this method may be preferred to the aerial method. We have a certain method of tracking which we call radio tracking. These days, that is what they do. They use radio tracking. Designing a manatee radio tag, they use tags, have proved challenging. This is because Very often, we have to work in salt water, brackish water. And the signals, the necessary signals, are often difficult to get. Also, the tag could hinder the animal's natural movement. And very often, the batteries of the tag can get expired. So, it cannot give you any signal. So, the earliest versions of tags were very bulky, huge, and gave a lot of weight to the animal. Some reached about 1.5 kilograms of a tag. Apparently, this is a lot of weight to the animal, which is already heavy and slow moving. And this weight apparatus is put around the manatee. It is fixed around the animal using bolts, metals, and nuts. And these bolts and nuts eventually corrode, they rust, and the belt break off. So you may even lose the tag with time. So improvements have come up with this type of tags. They've come out with floating transmitter belts, which are a bit easier using antenna as a way of trying to reduce the weight. However, the use of the tether, the rope, often entangles nets and other things in the water. So they often break loose, and you may lose the tag. So using tag fine is good, but it has so many difficulties. So in 1985, satellite link transmitters were employed, and making it possible for to track manatees from desktop computers. We are able to track it from desktop computers rather than tracking on the water. Where we use antenna on the water, and then we have to send the information to a desktop computer. This has been found very, very useful, and therefore there are different types of transmitters in use now to track manatees. Some ultrasonic pingers are used for underwater detection of the animal. We also have very high frequency units, VHF, to locate the animals in the environment. That is also possible. UHF, ultra high frequency tags, are also employed. To me, this is the most interesting one, the PTTT tags, platform terminal transmitters. This one can be inserted into the animal and can transmit information using satellite images, and then information is sent to computer desktop to receive signals of their locations. This looks a little complex but easy, but can be done. Perhaps this project may consider using any of these transmitters as a way of trying to locate the animal in terms of distribution, relative abundance. The PTT tags can be taken anywhere on Earth's surface. So anywhere, since locations are relayed from satellites in space back to ground-based stations. And scientists can access the information by computer. So this is another very promising way of trying to find the distribution and abundance of the animal. But tracking is a skill. It's not so simple. Some training have to be done if we want to do this. Integration with GPS and all the transmission, sound recordings, and temperature, salinity measurement, all those, it requires some training if we want to use this approach. Now, to illustrate the tag, How do we do it? This is how it is. This is the Manatee. Here. The tag is tied on the pendulum cord. And then it is held on, bolted. This bolt, the details are here. See the bolts. This is metal. Can corrode and break and fall. So you may tag the animal and finally end up with no tag. You can lose the tag. Tags are very expensive. I've forgotten the price. Very expensive. And imagine you lose the tag. Means it costs a lot of money. And again, as I mentioned, it gives, in our system, it gives away the animal. Our local fishers who are strong hunters, if you tag an animal here, if you are not careful, by tomorrow they are in the pot and then eaten up. So considering use of tag, we need to do a lot of education of our people. That's why I'm saying the PTD tags are there inserted, and they send information to satellite and desktop, we get the information. Perhaps this could be a better option. These are some of the information for obtaining information. I will later talk about the practicality we can do through scanning operations, maybe tomorrow. But these are the technical, scientific way of establishing and following Manatee. Thank you.